Come on.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the only podcast produced by three two-time winners of IMSA's Spirit of the Race Award. You're listening to the Check Engine Podcast. Nick, Andrew, and Tristan are here, but that's about all I'm going to give you for the normal intro because it's a special episode today. We've got a very special guest with us to give us some insight into the life of a professional racing crew member. Friend of mine who I met just over a year ago at our favorite place in the world, Road America. Mr. Kyle Downs is joining us from Silicon Valley. What's going on, Kyle? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, I mean, Nick, we should pause. We have Kyle, and it's a double guest feature. I mean, we can see right there. We have, a beautiful guest star with you, Kyle. Could you introduce them, please?
Yeah, everybody. This is Kodak, the yellow-naped Amazon parrot. He's my second roommate. He's a good dude. He's sometimes very talkative and sometimes just hungry.
It's awesome. I hope we get
familiar.
I
understand that state of mind entirely. I'm either very talkative or I'm hungry. So
yeah, that's me in the off season, pretty much.
So
cool looking bird though. What a homie.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hopefully, how much insight does he have into motorsports? Like, does he pick races? Can he handicap, over-unders on lead changes? Anything like that?
When my roommate's willing to allow him to come to the track, he's sitting on the timing box calling strategy.
Nice. I love it.
Warp box cool. This lap. Warp box this lap. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Kyle, I can't intro in terms of like your credentials and what you do, because just following you on social, it seems like you're doing a new job or working with a different team almost every other weekend. I've seen GT World Challenge America. I've seen Lamborghini Super Trofeo. I've seen Michelin Pilot Challenge this year. So I think you would do a better job of just letting the folks know, like, what you're up to this year. What are the current jobs you have right now?
Yeah, this has been an interesting season. I started the season with goals to wear one uniform and work no more than like 3 series, which is even a stretch depending on what series you're looking at. So I started at Daytona with a brand new Porsche GT3, which turned out to be a vicious Daytona for anybody involved with the new car. And it goes to say that having a new car, especially in the ranks of like the WeatherTech Championship, when you show up to Daytona, all eyes are looking on you. You've got a manufacturer that's dedicated to helping the customer teams get through it. You're with a car so new, you're learning issues with the car rapidly and didactically. So with Daytona, the big hype was that the Porsche got this enormous BOP, and you would watch, let's say the Proton Mercedes or the Corvette just walk past the Porsche like it was standing still. And on the teams, we let's see, there was MDK and Wright and a bunch of the FAF being kind of the flagship for Porsche GT3 racing out in North America. We all had a running joke that we were racing in the Porsche Cup during the 24-hour race.
Everyone's out there, and we're by ourselves.
Yeah, and just a shout out to the FAF guys. The fact that those guys finished on the lead lap and I want to say like fourth or fifth place. I know my car finished sixth, but most of the Porsches encountered issues. One car, had a significant, I think it was a engine failure that caught fire. There, it was just the teams are trying to like dial in a car with bronze drivers, with pro drivers, working with Porsche and rapid updates going into the car. I think we dropped our engine about 8 times. But it's one of those, in 2 weeks dropping an engine every day is kind of rough. But I gotta give a shout out to Porsche because I've worked with a lot of manufacturers, and I equally love all these manufacturers, but there's something to be said about Porsche and how developed they are in their processes, in their standards, and their communication between parts supply and engineering support. And at Daytona, when you're looking at the debut of the 963 prototype, so you have this massive organization through Porsche and Penske, and then you also have a brand new GT3 car that there were 7 chassis that arrived at Daytona. So it was a big stretch for Porsche to be able to manage the demand from the customer teams and Penske and all that, and they handled it like champs, man. I mean, that fleet of people from Porsche, I just gotta say bravo.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just wondering that. Just my first question here. Not knowing, I'm probably the person who knows the least about racing, and I'm probably also the person who has the wildest conspiracy theories about racing.
Everything.
Ooh,
Not everything. The aliens are real. It's fine. Anyways, so I'm really curious about how that representation, that brand representation, that sort of knowledge of racing, what it's like to work on a car from Porsche is different from, like in WeatherTech, there are the occasional privateers or a startup brand like Hyundai or Alpha where there might be one car running. So what does it look like if you have a major problem, or if you report to them from the mechanic's point of view, like a repeated problem with your car? What's the difference there?
That's a good question. I have a good story to back that up. So on the Porsche that I worked on at Daytona this year, I was what they call the front axle mechanic. So anything from the fuel cell forward was my domain. So I was responsible for every nut, bolt, weave of carbon, everything that was on that side of the car. And mind you, everybody on the crew, we trained really hard in when we got the car delivered to when we ran it, that everybody on the car knew how to work on it. And even some of the support staff that were, put in pit lane or equipment management or anything like that, if we had to tap them in, those guys would be tearing the car down with us. So we had a pretty good flow of just getting that car apart and back together and running properly without issue. But there was a point at Daytona where I noticed a little bit of like leakage on the steering rack, and I reported it to Porsche, and we cleaned it up and we kept an eye on it and just monitored. It didn't affect the drivability of the car or anything like that. But I remember one night we had finished prepping and put the car cover on, and we were having our nightly team meeting, and Porsche came up and they're like, "Hey, we want to take the steering rack out. We want to inspect it. We encountered an issue with one of the cars, and we want to basically have each team disassemble their steering racks so we can diagnose and advise." Other manufacturers will give you that support, but you won't have the parts, right? And for having a new car where you have 7 chassis and especially with a war going on in Europe and just the availability of parts in regards to manufacturing and shipping and stuff, you're limited on what you're able to give to the teams, especially with an issue like that where you have 7 steering racks that might be in question. And Porsche didn't waste any time to be like, no, we want reliability. We want these cars to run right. And if we have even the slightest doubt, we're going to replace that part. Whereas, I'm trying to think of, and I don't want to throw any manufacturers under the bus, but I think it's safe to say that Porsche, especially with sports cars and GT racing, they have it on lock. I mean, they've been doing it for decades. They are one of the oldest brands in sports car racing and one of the most successful, especially if you look at sales in regards to their customer racing program. I don't think you'll find any other sales numbers over the last 30 years that come anywhere close to what Porsche has produced and sold. But like when Nick met me, I was at Lexus, and Lexus has the most from a factory standard. You have the privateer team, Vassar Sullivan, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And it's a top-notch organization that I would say when you look at some of the top teams in IMSA, those guys came up as underdogs. And there's you look at the crew. When I first got on that crew, I was a dude who had been in IMSA for like a year. I had started doing SCCA and club racing out west, and then got into Porsche Cup cars pretty early in my career and started running those. And during COVID, I lost all my work on the West Coast, and Silicon Valley got locked down, and I went from having an income to having nothing. And I got an opportunity at some point to work with a team in IMSA, and I was on the fence, like, hey, do I take this cush tech job building automated vehicles, like robots basically, or do I make if I'm lucky half as much and go racing and follow my passion? And being the impulsive ADHD dreamer that I am, I went straight for the racetrack.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
You won't find any arguments here.
Yeah, exactly. I've worked in the biotech industry previously and sat at a desk and built robots, and it was a cool job, and I had air conditioning and a salary and an 8-hour workday, and it was cool, but it wasn't quite as exciting as jumping over the wall and doing a pit stop, with with a team of just straight badasses and winning a race through a pit stop. It's the satisfaction that you get from working together with a team and winning is I would say unmatched.
Okay, so that's basically our whole episode right there. We can
we're done. All right. We're done. We're good.
It up beautifully. Yeah. Kyle, you just nailed it. Shortest episode we've ever done. You're dabbling into so many questions that we want to ask. But let's talk about, well, one, you said we asked like where you were working this year. You start off with Porsche. That's not the logo on your shirt. That's a different logo we're seeing on your shirt and hat. So let's talk about like what other, after Daytona, what happened, and then we'll kind of circle back into how do you go from biotech to like jumping into mechanics and kind of how you got into it. So like,
sure.
Talk about the logos on your shirt and your hat and like what you're doing with that group.
So post Daytona, I decided to make a move to work with a driver and program that I'd kind of cut my teeth with getting into pro racing, and that team was a familiar name to many as TRG, the Racers Group. And TRG is a very I hate to call it old, but it's been around. The brand has been around for 30 years, and it's got quite the legacy to it. I mean, if you walk in the reception room of that building, they've run out of room for trophies. And they
won the Rolex overall a while back, didn't they?
So they were the last car to win the Rolex 24 overall in a GT car.
Yeah,
which is it's
all
impressive.
The prototypes.
Yeah, it's impressive. And they won Le Mans. They had such a strong run in the early 2000s with Porsche, and then worked with GM. They had a NASCAR team for a couple of years, and they were basically Aston Martin North America for years. So I've been working with those guys since probably 2020, 2021, and that was a big step for me because I was basically brought in to prep all the cars, and it was a big jump for me because I went from, club racing or amateur series like the Porsche Cup to joining something like SRO and working with drivers like Spencer Pumpelly and Andy Lally and Derek DeBoer. So this year, when Derek DeBoer called me and asked me, he went like this: "Hey, I bought a GT3 car. It's his first GT3 effort, especially him owning the car. I bought this GT3 car. We're running a GT World Challenge. I've got support from Aston Martin, and we're gonna have Ross Gunn and Valentin Hasselklot drive the car." And I said, "That sounds fun. Let's go." So, starting with the first race at Sonoma, it was a whole new crew. Nobody had worked together before. We were working with equipment that was 30 years old. And I kid you not, our wheel gun was about 30 years old. And
Yikes.
Starting from the first race moving forward, we were a team that adapted, actively. We always learned more and more every race event. But what I love about this group, being an underdog group that we're on a very tight budget. We don't test. We have a small group of people. If you look at some of the GT3 teams that we're up against, and we right now we're holding a third place seat in the Pro-Am Championship for GT World Challenge America, and it's getting to be a very tight battle for the championship.
So you're right in it, though. Like, mathematically, you guys still... Is there a chance?
We're I'd have to look at the points. Everybody is getting stomped by CrowdStrike by Riley, which is the George Kurtz, the George Kurtz squad and Mercedes and stuff. And there seems to be a trend that the Mercedes is just a really, really strong car. Is very popular. I mean, in our field, there's got to be at least 4, maybe 5 Mercedes. A couple less after this last race at Road America. There was some incredible carnage at the last event. But we're the only Aston Martin in the entire SRO GT3 fleet. Across all the different series that they run that classification. So for us, it's we have a small crew and a really cool driver lineup with a bronze driver that's determined and strong and capable, and it's really cool to see Derek, the bronze driver, and the guy kind of running this program, watching him progress into a multi-podium championship contending driver is so cool. So it's been really fun working with Aston Martin and the Racers Group with Archangel Motorsports, helping manage the program. It's been a fun and wild ride, and I can't wait to see us win that race, whether it's Sebring or Indy. I know we got one in us, and we're gonna win it.
That's awesome. I'm gonna just one point of clarification I'm gonna ask for before I'll turn it over to my co-hosts to jump in, but you're talking about Derek DeBoer as a bronze driver. So for people who maybe not know what these rankings are, sometimes they get complicated and convoluted with Pro-Am and pro and amateurs. And, could you just kind of talk about like what the ratings and the classifications? Because it's essentially like these guys have a lot of money. They've earned it somewhere else. And
right.
They want to go racing, right? Like
the sport relies on people, whether it be like patrons / sponsors or paying drivers, which are commonly referred to as gentleman drivers. The sport heavily relies on them to basically for job security, anywhere across from a crew guy like me all the way up to a governing body in a series. So the FIA and IMSA and all these different governing bodies, we have a classification system that's basically bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And then beyond that is like guys who are super fast, and if I'm lucky to meet one of them, it's a big deal.
It's
Typically,
like Platinum and Max Verstappen.
yeah, super license, the one that everybody's fighting over. So with your bronze drivers, and it's typically an age thing, but I've seen it be classified elsewhere. So I might not be the best reference technically, but I can give you the quick gist of it, which is your bronze drivers are typically amateur drivers. They're gentlemen. They can afford to pay for the sport. They come in and drive. They get driver coaching. They get crew support. It's a customer service based system around the bronze driver and their relationship with the race car and with the team. Then you move up to silvers. Silvers are typically what I would call junior pros. So they're either good young drivers they're getting in the sport and they have some sponsorship money to help them with the goal of being a works or a factory driver, if they aren't already. And then golds and platinums are usually really good at their job. They're good at doing race car, and if they're not supported by a factory and hoard out as a factory driver, they're usually guys that are really good and they get paid to race.
And then that's where the go ahead, Tristan.
I'd say that's where the split is then, really. Primarily, like the gold and platinum drivers are the ones that they're getting paid to do this, versus silver and bronze are paying to do it mostly.
Yeah, typically.
Okay.
So it's very interesting because there's always a strategy game getting played with how the driver classification works. And I think a great example that I'll use is at Vassar Sullivan, we switched the GTD Pro car to GTD under the number. I think it was we went from number 14 to number 17. Something pretty off key for the Vassar guys. And we ran in the GTD class at Belle Isle the last year they were doing Belle Isle. And we couldn't run, because of the classification for GTD, we couldn't run our normal pro lineup, which was Hawksworth and Barnacote. So we tapped in Kyle Kirkwood, who was our reserve driver and endurance third driver for the long races, and Kyle was a silver. And if you don't know the name Kyle Kirkwood, you should look him up because he's pretty good at doing race car. He's well, you put a steering wheel in that guy's hand.
He's won 2 IndyCar races this year, but he's a silver.
Yeah, you put a steering wheel in his hands and he's going to do the job, and he's going to do it pretty good. Kyle, I remember Kyle had gotten in an accident in qualifying and had the wheel ripped out of his hand. It hurt his wrist, sprained it or maybe fractured it. And he came into grid, and at the time I was the driver changer for that car. So either me or my car chief Travis would belt the drivers in right before start engines. And Kyle rolls up in a golf cart with a big old bag of ice on his hand. And I'm like, "Hey, are you okay? Are you good to drive?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's got power steering. I'm fine." And he won the race. We had a pretty tight gap with the Heart of Racing Aston Martins, and we did a short pit stop, which was 2 tires and a splash of fuel and a driver change, and we did this 20-second pit stop, which is a pretty quick stop for tires, fuel, and a driver change. And we sent the car out, Jesus. And it just barely got ahead of the Aston on the outlap, and we stayed in front of them and won. And it was a cool. That was my first IMSA win, so it was really special. But I think the other special thing about it was at Belle Isle they have a fountain, and if you win, you go swimming in the fountain. And I've got pictures framed in my house of all of us just swimming and floating in the fountain at Belle Isle. And that was the last year they did it. They moved the race to downtown Detroit. So, for all we know, we might be the last GT team to ever win a race at Belle Isle. So it's pretty special.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Last to swim in the fountain.
Yeah. One last frolic in the very heavily chlorinated fountain.
Yeah,
Safety first.
Yeah.
You mentioned winning a race on a tire changer pit. or pit strategy. I was literally thinking today how much. So in 2019, you guys remember, went to Watkins Glen, and
He will never let this go. By the way,
no, I won't. It was the first year for the Velosters, was it in IMSA? I think first year for the Velosters.
Yeah, I think it was in 19.
Yeah, the Civic Type R beating it on the last lap because they went to dry tires. I was literally thinking today how much that still hurts my heart.
So, Kyle, for context, Andrew has 2 Hyundais in his garage right now. So he is a Hyundai fanboy.
Yeah, my first IMSA car was a Hyundai. It was a Veloster.
That's awesome. That's just so
Andrew had one for a while.
I did, yeah, for a couple of years.
Yeah, I got to drive the road car once, and I actually found it quite fun. It was the back door thing is still like, you walk to one side. Oh, I'm gonna get in the back. Oh wait, I gotta go to the other side and open like the Ford F-150 style, like king cab side door.
The way I always thought about it is that's the passenger's problem. I drive a coupe. I don't know what they're doing over there. It doesn't matter.
I got you.
That's on the far side of the car. I never get to see that.
Yeah, exactly. They can do whatever they want. It's fine.
Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, gosh, where to begin? I think I might start asking a really weird question based on the impact that you have on the teams that you work with, right? So obviously, great feelings would be jumping over the wall, quick changes, quick, victories, clearly, especially winning on strategy. But I'm curious about how it feels to the team to have like a nagging problem that continues through the weekend, or a more sudden problem like that you remember at Watkins, actually, the Type R specifically had a problem with front passenger side tire load. They would just blow front right tires constantly. I mean, what's really, I guess my question is, what is the worst thing to deal with in your position?
Well, the worst thing to deal with is an unhappy crew, an unhappy driver in a car that constantly needs to be worked on, that has zero pace whatsoever.
Sure.
So Daytona this year.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing: we got through that race. We finished sixth in our GTD Pro debut. We had a great driver lineup. The team owner, who was one of the drivers, a guy named Mark Kwame, he was nothing but excited. We were all scared that, like, oh man, like we didn't win the race, like, at least we didn't go behind the wall, but we're like a couple laps down. And Mark got through the weekend just totally excited. He was so jazzed and was so proud of the crew for overcoming the various hurdles that we went through. And so at the end of it, it was like, hey, we got through the race. We got through a lot of speed bumps along the way, but we finished. And I mean, finishing Daytona or Le Mans or even Sebring, any like endurance race like that, just getting through it, especially with a new car that's fairly untested in competitive waters like that. It's the road to get there is filled with anxiety and minimal sleep, but just finishing the race at Daytona, there's a pat on the back that needs to be had for any team member that is on a car that finishes that race.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
I would say that like a good example of what you're talking about was our week at Road America with the 007 TRG car. We
love
encountered
that. Love the number, by the way. I'm a Bond nerd.
You have to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, 007 and TRG, that's like there's a long history of the GT3 cars being like 007 and 009. So it was cool to see us go back to the team's roots, from almost a decade ago, if not more, of when they ran the V12 Aston, in IMSA and whatnot. Which if you guys haven't heard what that car sounds like, just look up the V12 Vantage GT3 car, and that's it's a beautiful symphony. Where that was back when Aston ran their own engines. Now Aston has a partnership with AMG, and we run the twin turbo V8 that the Mercedes GT3 cars run. And it's awesome engine. It's super reliable. It's got good power. Um, it's pretty bulletproof motor from what I've experienced.
So what was going on at Road America that was an example of what Andrew was talking about?
So we encountered a braking issue early into the first session. Lost brakes. Had to pull the car in, replace a bunch of parts, and go out for another session. And the next session, we started encountering an ABS issue where one wheel wasn't really playing ball with the other three, and you could see it on the data where the wheel was basically like locking up and it wouldn't free itself. So we had to work very hard to step by step diagnose, okay, what's going wrong, and it required a lot of work from the crew to the point where we never practiced pit stops. We were missing quite a bit of track time, just trying to get down to the bottom of this issue and trying to figure out what the right, when you're on a budget and you want to maximize the budget, you diagnose. If you're like short on time and money's no option, you got spare parts, you just throw a whole new system at it. So, in this case, it would have been like, hey, we'll throw a new ABS unit, new calipers, or rebuild the calipers that we've got, and new lines, and just money's no option. As John Hammond would say, spared no expense, and just throw everything on there and send it, right? Whereas a really good, in my opinion, a really good team, a really experienced group of individuals, they're going to test, they're going to do component tests, they're going to inspect things, and they're going to try to find the exact issue of what's wrong with the car before you throw an entire new system at it, which in essence could be a variety of variables. So sure. We struggled all the way. I mean, basically, Derek, our bronze driver, didn't even get to put in a flyer lap until qualifying. So we found ourselves, long nights, long days, getting up early, coming home late, just really hammering down on trying to get this car sorted out and paceful for the two drivers. And, I think we qualified 7th for both races, like 7th overall, and just worked really hard and had a good pit stops and good strategy to where we got ourselves to P3 in race 1, and we just barely lost P3 on the last corner of the last lap on race 2 to one of the Mercedes. A little bit of argy-bargy, as it were, and we still managed to scratch a 4th place finish. And for me, I'm looking at my crew like, we did it, guys. We're on the podium. We encountered all these issues, and we had our struggles along the way, but we're getting good points. We're still in 3rd for the championship. We're holding on to that 3rd place very dearly and working our way towards catching up to 2nd. So I it's one of those weekends where it's really hard, and you can see morale get lower and lower as these problems keep coming up, and there's a big question mark over what's wrong with race car, and nobody likes showing up and having a car that just seems to have problem after problem, and the drivers don't feel confident in it. And I think a big part of my job and my career is doing my absolute most for the safety of the people piloting the car, but also be helping them maintain confidence in the hardware. And I had a pro driver recently. He's a driver coach that works with one of my teams that I run Porsche Cup cars with. And he said there's two kinds of people that are racing these kind of cars. There's your pro drivers who typically treat the car as a teammate, and they are working with the car as a teammate. And then you have, typically like a gentleman driver who is racing that car because they did something right and were successful in their career, and they own companies and manage businesses and whatnot. And they're used to treating the car as an employee. So they are treating the car as if they were managing it, right? And those are in my opinion two very separate driving styles. And when you have someone that's like a manager that's managing the car and the car isn't performing, it's this big like, well, why isn't it doing that? And I don't feel confident in it because it's not doing what I want it to do. Whereas the driver who's going to treat it like a teammate, say, hey, I've got something negative here. This is what it feels like. This is what I think it is based on what I'm feeling from the steering wheel and from what's under me and through my body, and it's with a pro driver they will fight to have confidence in the car. They will do everything they can to communicate what their needs are to optimize the car. Whereas, typically your gentlemen are going to get frustrated because you don't really expect those kind of guys to know everything about cars. It's just, I can't think of many gentleman drivers or amateur drivers that are mechanics or are mechanically inclined to the point where they can say, hey, I think that I have a sticky caliper because this is what it feels like when I roll off the brakes coming into a corner. And frankly, like these days, you have data to help you navigate those kind of issues. But some of the best drivers I know, I mean, Nicky Lauda is a great example. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him. Nicky was well known for being able to set up and engineer the car that he raced, and he helped multiple manufacturers and brands, both in his driving career and outside of it, to help optimize cars and structures and teams. And he was one of the key figures at AMG Petronas, the Formula One team, to help them really. I mean, they won 8 championships almost in a row. So, I mean, they did pretty good.
Mm-hmm. I'd say.
Yeah, I think you mentioned you said like they've got the technical know-how, and but earlier before that you said they will go out of their way to have confidence in the car, and I think that really struck me because we've seen that like at races where you'll get an amateur car that comes in and like he comes out and he's like pointing at the car and like fix this, fix that, fix this. And like the pro driver comes in and the car is half in pieces because they got shunted 2 laps ago, but they haven't bothered to come in yet because the car's still fine. The car's still fine. And like, and then they were forced to come in by their engineers because, like you said, you got the data that's like, hey, nothing is fine. And it's, it's not pig-headedness and, race car driver stubbornness. It's like, no, car's still good because, you wouldn't bail on an injured teammate. You don't bail on an injured car. And I think we've seen that a few times when we're at races where the pro drivers really persist in driving these cars, and some of the gentleman drivers will like, oh, hey, there's something wrong. I'm getting out. Fix it. And I think that it's clear to see from the outside too.
Well, just look at the great example of that, the real famous footage from Le Mans with Mark Webber in the AMG that just started doing random backflips into the trees. Well, he had said that like
the Sky Miles
car. He got a Sky Miles car. But he had said in an interview much later, I think, well into his Formula One career, that like he didn't let go of the steering wheel until like he hit the first tree. Like he had backflipped 2 or 3 times, and he was still in his head thinking, like, I can wrangle this in. Like I got this.
A little bit of left,
and the brake lights were still on.
Yeah, he was still holding the brake.
He had his foot into the floor and his hands on the steering wheel, convinced that he and the car could get through this when he was in the air already.
Yeah. So that brings up this pro versus am discussion. Brings up this question for me is, have you noticed in your time, Kyle, like, what's the best way to phrase this? Is a pro or an am driver easier to please?
That's a great question. I think it all comes down to communication, right? It all comes down to relationship, and that's, it starts with the driver's relationship with the car. And I think going to the relationship and the communication between who drives the car and who works on the car and where those avenues meet is super important. So I work with a team called Black Sheep Racing, and we're a little grassroots team that has won multiple championships. It's very different. And we're very true to the name. Because we're typically the guys that are getting in trouble for bending the rule book or not following it. Just like all the
You know,
all the other teams do. We're kind of a grassroots organization, and the business model is very different because it's a driver co-op. So it's one of those deals where it's a nonprofit organization, and it's just we don't make any sense. We're a nonprofit racing team that wins championships and has a really committed group of people. So I run the number 274 car in the Porsche Sprint Challenge Western Championship.
Yeah.
And it's a very different role for me because typically my role is I'm an assistant. I've been everything from I started in IMSA as a tire guy and like a helper mechanic, like a what they call a number two. And typically on a car you have like your you know car chief, number two, three, and so on. However many people are assigned to the car. Um, at Black Sheep, we're usually a smaller staff, and so my job is not just mechanic. It's not just I do car. I've had to teach myself how to be a suspension engineer, diagnostics and data guy, as well as managing the car mechanically and everything that goes on with it. So it's a cool opportunity because it makes me a universal weapon almost, and that's always been
Sure.
my goal is that I can be a plug and play, one stop shop because I've done everything from with that car, and we've had success. Right now we're 2 points behind second in the championship, and that's the car that really poured my heart and energy into, mainly because I have to do it all almost myself. Um, and it's just great because like not a lot of people get the opportunities that I have to be able to step up and try to lead, the engineering side of something with a car. I'm used to like filling out a notebook and giving it to the engineer. The engineer hands it back and gives me numbers, and I set the car up to those numbers and to that fuel load and those tire pressures and send it out. And even then, there's usually a guy for all of those items. There's usually a tire guy and he does tires. There's the car chief and he does car. There's the engineer, he makes car go fast, and then there's driver, he drives car. Um, with something like this, I'm actually filling all those roles and wearing that hat, all those different hats at the same time. And I think those kind of opportunities, if people are up for it and in some cases can survive it, it makes them so useful and so vital and valuable in a sport where there's a lot of compartmentalization of people's roles.
Interesting.
I forgot what the question was, but there's that.
That's
I
all
think
right.
you got it. I think you
Yeah,
were there.
the answer was in there somewhere.
It's funny, you talking about wearing all these different hats and doing things that you hadn't done previously. And one of my questions actually spawned from several conversations I've actually had coincidentally with a lot of people in my life right now about how about you mentioned you're a millennial in Silicon Valley, and you're living that life on top of all the race car life, and how a lot of us, I mean, I think Andrew, Nick, I think has been pretty laser focused, marketing, and now he's marketing, so he's pretty much on track. But
I was sales first. I was sales.
It's true.
And then marketing.
But he was eye on the prize. I went from a biology background to an IT background and bounced all over the place. Andrew, you were what, music, English, and then IT. Like what? So a lot of us haven't ended up in jobs that we went to college for,
Right.
and it's like what skills did you bring to this job that you didn't expect to have to use. And that was a conversation I've been having with a lot of my friends lately. And that was kind of a question I had for you, was like, did you ever imagine, like, there's obvious stuff like, oh, I'm gonna, I've got mechanical acumen, I've got an ability to learn stuff, but like, I never thought as a race car mechanic I'd need to, write really well, or like, like
Yeah.
what skill did you not expect to ever have to use, and it's a huge part of your job, if there are any. It might just be like, well, I turn wrench, done. Like, so,
Right.
I don't know, but maybe if there's anything that's, because I know you mentioned we don't want to go over like, oh, how do you get this job and everything else. It's been done a million times, but what maybe is like one surprising skill that mechanics need that people wouldn't necessarily think they would need.
It's a good question, and the answer is, at least from my end, networking.
There you go.
Networking is super key, and I think a great person, successful person in the industry where he's at would be Bozy. Bozy's
Former
skill
guest of our show.
Yeah, former guest. Bozy is incredible at networking. He's a great writer, and he's very friendly, and like one of my favorite things he did at Vassar, and I actually learned, I took notes from how he did it to apply it to when I have to do it, was every week he would do these tech talks in the garage while we were prepping the car for the race the next morning. And Bozy would take the door off and hold it over his head and be like, this is a carbon fiber door that weighs like 10 pounds. And he'd have this whole group of people, and he was just so well spoken and so approachable for fans, right? So you'd always have fans coming by being like, hey, is Bozy here? And I think that there are avenues for racers now. There's Facebook groups, there's like startup apps that have been trying to tap into this market, or try to make a market out of it, for people trying to get jobs in racing. And I think that selling yourself, like you can't. I think someone who would be successful, or who is successful, is someone that markets through their results. And those people might not have quite the outreach of the people that not only have the results, but they know how to network to different teams and people. I've gotten a lot of really cool jobs from word of mouth, just from people who said, hey, I worked with this guy. He was, a mechanic on my car, or in some cases I've been a crew chief on teams in IMSA and Porsche One Make Series and whatnot. And the word of mouth, it's such a small community, sports car racing, and that community even sometimes kind of shares with the IndyCar paddock, or the NASCAR paddock, or even club racing. And I really think that networking is a great way to be able to find success, or to find that next step, or that team that you've been looking for, that team that you can work with and really learn from. And for me, that's honestly how I got the job at Vassar Sullivan that I did last season. And that was, I went from working on a TCR team, like the lowest budget, goofiest TCR team that, we were just there. We were like it was like they were club racers. It was first year in IMSA. We had no idea what to do, and we just kind of adapted, what is the best word to use. And the guys came together, and it was kind of a, hey, this is a sink or swim environment, let's swim. And we all came together and did the best that we could and got the best results that we could. And then one day I was at Petit Le Mans, and I think it was 2021, which was my first year in IMSA. And one of my friends was a tire guy for one of the Vassar cars, and he's like, hey man, we're short on a couple guys. Do you want to do the Petit Le Mans race with us? And I was like, sure, that's cool. Extra money, I'm down. I'll extend my weekend for another 24 hours. And I came into that race being the newest member on the crew, just like a bright-eyed, deer in the headlights dude on a team with some serious racing OGs. I mean, And Vassar Sullivan's crew is a combination of NASCAR, IndyCar, and very, very high functioning sports car racing guys. So I kind of showed up like about as, I don't know, is the car yellow or green? I'm colorblind, so I still to this day don't know if the Vassar car is yellow or green. But it was really bright and easy to spot on track.
Yeah,
But
It's
I was
day glow. It's both.
I was
It's
about
like-
as green as the car. But it was just a networking thing. Like somebody knew me and they were like, "Hey, I know this guy and he's going to be reliable. And he's going to be dependable for the role that we need him for." And he's gonna plug in and be told what to do and just get after it. So it's a small community, and being able to network and being able to back up the networking, the gift of gab, as it were, with results and hard work ethic. It can take people pretty far in this industry.
So you got the gig with Vassar Sullivan, and you mentioned Petit. You've done the 24 a few times. I imagine for folks on the crew, it is actually much longer than a 24.
Oh
So
shit!
why
Yeah,
don't you-
it's 40 hours.
Yeah,
Dude.
so
it's 40
yeah, why-
hours.
Why don't you take us through, I think that's something that people maybe don't understand. You see, you hear about the drivers when they get out from their stint, they go have a massage, they get something to eat,
Yeah.
they go back to the hotel or to their motorhome and they sleep. And they show you guys, you have Walmart camp chairs and a Cliff Bar
And a packing blanket.
and a packing, what is, just kind of walk through the grind, if you can sum it up somehow, in what goes into crewing for a 24-hour race.
So, for pre-grid, you're pushing the car like a mile across the infield.
Of course.
You're pushing the car pretty far to pit lane, and
Quadzilla.
yeah, and you're sifting through this crowd of 30,000 racing fans, and the race starts, and I think it's really exciting for the first 30, 45 minutes, and then everybody kind of gets into your groove and you do your first pit stop and you start going into it. I really feel like I'm on autopilot up until hour 12. And that's when I'm starting to, you're just, it's all about hitting your marks. For a pit stop, it's, hitting your marks, getting through it. Doesn't need to be the fastest stop in the world. It's just, hey, pace yourself. Right. And that's what the drivers are doing in the car. That's what the strategists are doing on the timing box. It's maintaining the pace and, minimizing mistakes and just getting through it. And as you get into the night, you got the fireworks going off at the 12-hour mark, and it's all right, got another 12 hours of this race. And you really start to see fatigue set in later in the race, and especially for the teams that have to go behind the wall and fix a car and then get back out there, because now there's a lot more pressure to try to catch up. In 12 hours you can catch up. You lose a dozen laps or so. There's opportunities to catch up. It's a long race, and strategy plays a big part of that. When you get to the end of the race, you can't wait for it to be over, and then you have to pack up everything. And I've had situations where we had to tear the car down and give a drivetrain component like a gearbox or something to the manufacturer, and you do a set what we call a set down, which is where you put the car on the scale pad and you just collect numbers, and you see how much over the course of 24 hours the numbers of the alignment changed during the race. And that's, in my opinion, it's really important data. But when you've been at it for 40 hours, dude, and you gotta put the car on the setup pad and you're still in a suit that doesn't smell great, fire suits, you're in that thing for 24 hours. It really seals in the flavor. So it's it's you're tired, you're grumpy, and even for the guys that end up winning, your car's sitting in line getting picked through by the tech guys, for quite a bit before you pack up. So I think here's a good one. So I I got to go to Sebring to do a test with a GT3 car, and the Garage 56 guys from Hendrick were doing their first 24-hour test with the NASCAR, the Le Mans car.
Oh, nice.
And I'm doing my pit stops, and I'm like 5'7" and 160 pounds. So I'm not the biggest guy on pit lane. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in sports cars you got a lot of big guys over the wall. In NASCAR, you got nothing but big guys over the wall. And these guys, at Hendrick or Joe Gibbs and stuff, like these guys are athletes. These guys got picked out of, they're linebackers from a football team, and their entire job is to do pit stop. Like, guy is, I do jack, I do wheel change, I do tire hang. Like, that's their job. And I had this like 7-foot tall linebacker come up to me, thick Southern accent, and he's asked me, so he's like, y'all done one of these 24-hour races? And I was like, done a few. Daytona, Thunderhill, which Thunderhill is 25 hours, but what's another hour? And the guy's like, so what do you recommend? I'm like 4 pairs of socks, at least 2 like head socks, like balaclavas, and sleep. Just sleep in between every pit stop. Just sleep. Like, some guys are crazy and they're like, hey, I'm gonna stay up the whole race because that's what badasses do. Me, I do a stop, I'm lights out. I get some food, sip of water. I try to avoid caffeine until I'm really hurting. So like, even at the 12-hour mark of the day, I've not had coffee or energy drinks or anything that day. And then once you're starting to get into the wee hours in the morning, especially when it gets really cold, like 4 or 5 o'clock, and then the sun's just about to start peeking out, that's when I start just easing into the caffeine. Change the head sock, change your because we have to wear Nomex socks and they're not really comfortable. So you change your Nomex socks, and you'd be surprised how refreshing dry clothes can be. So yeah, like, it's a grueling race, and I think the key to success is just like taking care of your body. It's like with the drivers, it's like take care of the hardware, and for the crew, it's like take care of your body, because you're going to be using it for quite a while.
Well, and also, just the way the competition is closed down now. Like, you don't see cars winning by multiple laps anymore. Like, you talk about fatigue setting in. You could be on your 25th and final pit stop, and that could be the money stop that gets you a win or gets you on the podium versus not. Like, and you got to be on it at that point. Now you're, 37 hours into your day at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great way to start the season. Yeah, you get through that race and you're like, all right, well, we got the rest of the season ahead of us.
It's all downhill from here.
So get the hard part out of the way first.
I'm interested in some more thoughts from you on that Le Mans Camaro. I mean,
dude, that thing was badass. That thing was bad. So I mean, we're in a GT3 car with an IMSA BOP, and we're running, I don't know, like 202s, 203s around Sebring. And then like, what's Jordan Taylor's like alter ego?
Rodney Sandstorm.
Yeah, so Rodney showed up in full form, and he was kind of like the reserve driver slash coach. You had Jimmy and Jensen. I think it was Jensen driving the car. Mm-hmm. And I mean, these guys, like, we're coming in the morning, and these guys are like running laps, and we do all of our testing, and we go home at like, I don't know, 8, 9 o'clock, and the car's still running laps, and we come back in the morning, car's still running laps. And how
boring is that for a driver? I'm sorry, but if you're doing a 24-hour test where you're the only car on track, like, dear God.
I don't know. I can imagine like the drink bottles, like for a NASCAR, the drink bottles filled with like what was the movie Idiocracy? Brondo. What plants crave. They've got like their electrolyte drink, where if it's like a European driver, they have their macchiato, as Jean Girard would say. I found it fascinating because as that 24-hour test, because they did not stop the car that entire test. At least as far as I could see, they were running laps constantly. And watching a NASCAR hug the wall in turn one at Sebring is fascinating because like those guys were, I swear to God, the dive planes that they put on like the front and rear of the car, like kind of off, or like on the side of the body for aero. Those things had to have only been that close from the wall. I mean, these guys were just driving the hell out of that thing, and I think the most fascinating thing was, you know, being on a sports car track like Sebring, which is a grueling track, and there's a reason why people use it as a testing standard. Watching that group do pit stops with a floor jack was awesome.
Yeah, because they
Because
didn't
like
have the option for the air jacks, right?
That's
no,
right.
no,
Yeah,
they
'cause
they
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 didn't rebuild the car that far.
no, and you know that car wasn't really held to the FIA standard that like anything else with a roof on it, you know, had. And yeah, we were just watching these guys like pump the car up and do the pit stop, and but they were doing it the European style where you have it's like you have a crew on the front axle and you have a crew on the rear axle, and so I think there's a slight difference from how Le Mans, like FIA and whatnot, does their pit stops to how NASCAR typically does their pit stops. Um, and just like you know, like we're over here on this Porsche practicing our first SRO style stops where you have one gunner and one wheel hanger, and you're doing four tires around the car with two people, right? So like you know, a fast stop for that is like I don't know, 27 seconds for tires. You know, me with the TRG guys, we're doing something like 29 to 30 seconds is a fast stop for us, and we're watching these guys like do a full tire change in like 15 seconds. We're with a floor jack, no air jacks, no guy like plugging it in and dropping it. It's like no guy does like one pump and then the car violently like slams on the ground and then goes around the car and does the same thing. It was pretty wild to see it. The car sounded amazing. It was fast as hell. I mean that thing was like 3 seconds faster than our car consistently. And just watching how it did at Le Mans, they found out how to juice that car even more because that car was walking past sports cars and like P3 cars and maybe even P2 cars like they were standing still.
Yeah.
It
It was.
was
I'm wondering if you
fascinating.
could put yourself in the situation of that team. You know, successful run at Sebring, less successful maybe at Le Mans. Was it transmission issues? Was the thing that kind of kept
Yeah,
coming around to bite
they
them?
went through a few gearboxes. I heard like they went in a few times, but they finished the race. And I think that I think in terms of like marketing and publicity, there was a lot of people arguing on Facebook, like on my personal Facebook, because I was hyping this car up. I was so hyped on it, and guys were like, "This is stupid. Like, you know, this is like, you know, who cares?" And I was like, "Okay, well, first of all, they showed up to Europe with a NASCAR and they won the pit stop competition. So there's something to be said for that because they dominated the pit stop competition. Secondly, the car was fast. Thirdly, Europeans are not used to that car. And you know, I'm sure a lot of Europeans are looking at it with you know with their nose up and thinking like, dude, this is a joke. And then you actually see what that car is capable of, and you see the support behind it and the success that it pulled together for itself. How can you hate it? You know, I think NASCAR gained a shit ton of viewers out of Europe just for that occasion. I know that personally for me, I became more interested in NASCAR thanks to that car. And after having met the guys and some of the drivers and just seeing the involvement of that car from testing all the way to watching it at Le Mans. I mean, I'm in the shop prepping a GT3 car and I've got basically my whole engineer set up with timing and scoring, GPS, and a live view of like one of the Ferraris. And I'm watching the whole race at the shop and watching the strategy evolve as the race went. Um, yeah, I think what NASCAR did to push that car into Garage 56 and push that program is going to have a long term benefit of fans just exposure. I thought it was a brilliant strategy.
It was weird because Tristan came over to my place, and we've a few times at least tried to go all 24, just do like a sleepover watch party of the thing. And maybe it's just because they weren't racing anybody, but like just watching the coverage, like the world feed that was coming through on Motor Trend, unless you saw it kind of in the background, like you wouldn't know it was even there. Like maybe once every couple hours they'd show the onboard and be like, yeah, here's the NASCAR car. And then for like 30 seconds, Tristan, like you can back me up in this, and then they just okay, something else, you know.
Yeah, it was weird because there was a lot of like in the pre-race and like the analysis and stuff, there was a lot of discussion about the car. Both, I mean, even on Motor Trend, like they were talking about it beforehand, but whoever was running the cameras wasn't finding the car, and it felt like it was on purpose.
Yeah, it was kind of like the redheaded stepchild of. I mean, at least I would imagine in the eyes of European viewers and fans, it was like a redheaded stepchild from. It was the most American thing America could have brought to Europe.
Yeah, we thought it was the Corvettes back in the day, but it's this.
Right. It's the exact opposite of Talladega Nights with Jean Girard coming to be a NASCAR driver. It was the polar opposite of that situation where we brought a NASCAR to a French sports car race.
Exactly. So let's get into let's hear some grit. Let's pull up
we got the grit.
Wow.
Here we go.
Yeah, so we want to go kind of deep behind the scenes, shit that maybe they don't want the public to know about. You can leave names of teams and people out of it. But just give us some of over the last few years you've been doing the professional level sports car stuff. Like give us some of the dirt.
So
I'll a couple of dirt stories.
I'll start. My friends are gonna hate me. So I'll say that there's a common theme with many racing teams, and usually they're high level teams that have a lot of success on track, but behind the scenes there is some wild shit that happens. One of them being I think mechanics love strippers. Crew members love strip clubs. Daytona being a very, very lucrative spot, let's say during the Rolex and the 500.
I am guilty. I have frequented one or two of those at some point during the 500.
Shout out to Molly Brown's. That place rocks. But it usually changes.
Yes!
It usually.
Yes.
So Nick, I have to tell you, every year I've noticed that it changes. So one club, because there's three clubs. It's like a triangle of divey strip clubs, like right off the strip down the street from my favorite restaurant. It's called Ocean Deck. And if you're ever in Daytona,
restaurant,
and you
eaten there plenty of times.
I actually got to see a local band that I grew up going to their shows in Santa Cruz play their first show in Florida at Ocean Deck. So it was kind of cool.
Nice.
Like, that place rocks. You get, they have awesome drinks and they have awesome food, and it's just good vibes all around. But just down the street, just off the strip, just off the main road.
The bird doesn't want to be a part of this. He has walked behind, out of the camera shot. Now he's back.
Come on, step up. Here, I'm gonna put him back on his all-seeing perch. So like there's these three strip clubs, and there's Molly Brown's. I think it's called Lollipops, and I forget the third one because I never go there. And last time I did go there, it ended up with an HR meeting with the entire crew. I never thought in my life that I would have a team-wide HR meeting that resulted in NDAs being handed out over going to a strip club. So my advice to any crew member is, if you walk into a strip club and you see all the support staff from a manufacturer as well as all the works drivers, just go to the other club. Like, don't get involved with your entire industry being at the same club as you. Don't wear your team gear out. Just dress like a civilian and have a good time, because the repercussions can be brutal. So So in Daytona, here's a good one. I'll tell you guys about the Sharks Lounge. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the Sharks Lounge.
No
So
hands up here.
this place was the diviest. Now it was before my time, but the stories I've heard, I might as well have been there. This place called the Sharks Lounge was this like divey, nasty strip club. But it could, as far as I've been told, it can make your wildest fantasies come true. I mean, you walk into this place and there's like nicotine dripping from the ceiling. You've got cages with I'm not going to be politically correct here, but midgets. There's midget strippers in cages. There's a pregnant woman in the other, and then there's the most famous one. There was a one-legged dancer that had different attachments for her prosthetic, including the M16A2 with the 203 40 mic launcher, like from is it Sin City? She had prop. She had a prop M16.
Yeah, Death Proof.
Grindhouse. Yeah, one of those Grindhouse ones. Yeah. Yeah.
So she had like a prop of that, and various she had a peg leg with like an eye patch. She had like a pirate thing going. But like that was the place where you could make all your weirdest fantasies that you never knew you had come true. So like going out so you have to understand like crew guys get worked pretty hard. You know, you're looking at a typically like a 12 to 15 hour day. You're working super hard. You're having to use your brains. I mean, like the reason why racing crew guys are racing crew guys is because they are good at solving issues like efficiently. They're not guys that stand around and do like a flat rate job or have 8 hours to complete, a job because that's the book time. It's like, no, fix the car, make the car go fast. Here's an issue. Here's a solution. Fix it. Crew guys are under a lot of pressure to perform. And what happens when you get some time off and you don't have that pressure to perform? You go out and party. So, I mean, the stories range from crazy strip club experiences where crew guys are out until they're basically coming back to the hotel 20 minutes before wheels up back to the track, and they show up, change their clothes, brush their teeth, and they're back out there. There's countless stories of rental cars being destroyed. One of the record teams. I was on a team where we destroyed a rental car and we hadn't even made it out at the airport. That was pretty rough. Terminal understeer was the issue that was spoken of.
Let's say, in their defense, I've only ever had 2 rental car near incidents, and they have both been within 5 minutes of getting the keys.
Jeez.
Yeah, I'm certain to learn that seems to be a typical trend. I mean, the going saying is, it's a rental, don't be gentle. And I've have you guys? I'm sure you guys have watched Days of Thunder.
Yep.
I've been in rental cars door to door with other crewmates. Like and the worst is when I'm sitting. I'm actually pretty timid in rental cars. I don't flog them too hard because. Even just I learned the hard way going to Canada for the first time that if you pass by all those CCTV booths, I got an email like 3 days ago after the Mosport race, and I have like something like a dozen speeding violations or like toll violations that are like add up to they like amount to no more individually to like $20, but there's like 12 of them. and
Canada really comes
the team owner I work for is like, dude, really? Or even at NOLA, if you guys ever go to NOLA, on your way to the track, there's a hidden camera box that will take a picture of you, and they got me doing like 50 and a 35 in this really nice Audi I was lucky enough to get at National. Yeah, rental car destruction is a good one. I heard a story about a pro driver who had a car full of crew, and he clipped. I think it was at Daytona, and there's like those little like low curb islands. So they're only about as high as a curb, but they're a median in the center of the road. Well, they clipped one and like successfully removed the entire like CVT out of like a Toyota minivan. And the car, they quick changed the CVT out of that thing, and it just kind of rolled to a stop up a curb down like a little ditch, and the guys just bailed out. Like 12 crew members packed into a Sienna, just dipping out of either side and just running for the nearest, probably Hooters or wherever they're going to take that party next, and they'll just leave the car there.
Oh my god!
And you'd be surprised. These are high functioning teams. These are back in the days like GTLM teams with like factory funding and backing. Shoot, yeah. So rental cars get destroyed.
Detroit.
Yeah. So rental cars get destroyed quite often. Guys go out
allegedly. Yeah, this would have never happened.
There's stories of guys going out. I recently, when we went to NOLA, we had some fun like feeding alligators. We were throwing like chicken breasts at alligators under a bridge.
Oh wait, so this wasn't
like
one
a
of the
tourist thing, like
in public.
Oh no! We found a bridge and we knew that there was gators, and we went out and started throwing shit at the gate. We went to a mart and bought some chicken. We started throwing chicken at the gators, and they loved it, and they didn't eat us either, so it was a good night. But I honestly, coming from California, like I've never thought I'd ever experience like having a couple beers with the boys under a bridge feeding gators, which I'm terrified of alligators. Like I'm the kind of guy that's like if I have an alligator running towards me, I've already drawn my sidearm, and if that thing gets any closer, I'm putting two between its eyes. I'm scared to death of large animals with teeth like that. But yeah, no, it's just,
understandable.
It's a dinosaur. I mean, I've grown up to fear dinosaurs.
Thanks, Spielberg.
Wise though.
Yeah,
that's a good fear to have.
Yeah, exactly.
Solid policy.
Let me see. So we're talking about grit. I think one of the funniest stories I've heard was a team that's got a lot of personality. That's a staple in GT3 IMSA. And I believe at the time that they were a Porsche team, but it might have been an Aston Martin. It was a few years back, and they showed up to Montreal with a sticker in French on the side of their car. And in French, it said, "Show us your tits," or something along the lines of that. And IMSA didn't catch it.
One of our favorite phrases, right, Nick?
IMSA didn't catch it until like the night before race day. So they had to remove it, but there was still the outline, like the sun-baked outline of the sticker on the side of the car, right? And meanwhile, that night, the crew, like half of the crew went out and partied, and Montreal's, if we're talking about strip clubs, Montreal's famous for having some pretty nice clubs. So the guys went out and like partied all night and just went crazy. And they came back the next day, like literally showed up to the hotel like half an hour before wheels up, long enough to get a shower, wash off some of the glitter and the perfume, and brush their teeth, and put on their uniform to go back out. And like that whole day, I guess it was like a really hot day, that race. And the guys would do their pit stops, and then as soon as the pit stop was done, you had guys like laying down on the ground with like wet towels over their eyes, and like it was like everybody else in pit lanes like, man, those guys had a good time last night because they're all laying on the ground behind their pit box.
Sweat it out, guys. Sweat it out.
Meantime, you've got the TV cameras on them, like, look what these guys have to go through.
Now, one team that I worked for personally was kind of known as the party team, and they were always kind of like a black sheep of the paddock because the owner had quite a reputation, and the team had just a reputation for being like the party team, and they always had low budget, a lot to do. Anybody that worked there, you'd probably go as far as say that they were probably a more abrasive bunch of individuals. When I first worked there, one of my friends commented that I was the only guy on that team that didn't look like he was on parole, which was actually pretty accurate. But these guys, and then there's a video on YouTube, and I'll send it to you guys when we conclude. So there's this thing. You have a race car gets crashed, right? And you have to basically switch to a different chassis, and you have to rebuild the chassis. So the chassis gets torn down to what we call a tub, and that's the bare chassis, is a tub. And these guys like took this tub apart and got the old tub, and they were hitting it with sledgehammers, and they're cutting it up, and they're just abusing what's left of this poor chassis. And then they decided to put it on a forklift and extend the forklift like 3 stories high, and drop this chassis off the forklift on its back. And mind you that the shop that we had was right next to these office buildings, so you had these like white collar, techie, like office guys, like kind of opening up the blinds with like their eyes like this, like what the hell are those guys doing? And we're literally dropping a chassis from 3 stories onto the ground and like laughing and like peeing on it and just doing all kinds of stupid shit. So yeah, like if so it's funny because like sports car guys are known to party. NASCAR, if those guys party, they're really good at hiding it because I don't hear a lot of stories. IndyCar, I work with a lot of IndyCar guys that were in the kart in the Champ Car days. They're from way back. And the stories I've heard about going overseas to like Brazil or Japan back when IndyCar would race internationally.
Yeah.
You'd hear stories about guys getting arrested, deported, like guys just misbehaving like Navy sailors. And a guy gets deported during a race overseas. Like, what do you do? Funny enough, you'll find that a lot of guys in the current sports car industry, you'll ask them like, what was your first race? And they'll be like, oh, I stood out in front of Daytona with a sign that says we'll work for, we'll volunteer to get my foot in the door. And you'd be surprised how many people, especially in Daytona loves racing, man. So here's a good one. You guys will like this. We had just finished the Indy 8-hour in 2021, I believe. And one of our customers was like, hey, I'm going to sell this car at the end of the season. I want to flog it out. I just spent a bunch of money on the service thinking this car was going to do the 8-hour, and we ended up using the B car. So he's like, I want to go to Daytona and do this Porsche Club event, and we're going to run like every session, and there's like only going to be 2 guys managing the car. So me and my boy Ethan, we kept it simple. We tires, fuel, check it on the setup pad, and just keep sending it out session after session. We put so many hours on that car. And on Saturday, the drivers came up to me, hey, there's this like 2-hour, hour and a half long like endurance race around Daytona. We want to do it tomorrow. I was like, okay. So, I'm going over the strategy with them. I was like, look, how about we brim the car and we come in for a pit stop and put a little more fuel in it and send it back out. And they're like, no, we want to do a tire change and a driver change and fuel and all that. I was like, I've got me and another guy. So I was like, that's enough to do the fuel and the fire bottle. And then we got to switch. And it's like a 4-minute, 5-minute mandatory pit stop. And we've done the deltas from the car coming into pit in to the box and pit out, which Daytona is kind of a long pit lane. And I was like, we do not have enough time to do an efficient pit stop and not lose our ass on track position. And he was like, well, you'll figure it out. You're a smart guy. I'm like, okay.
Right. Sure.
So we leave the track and go to a popular watering hole across the street from the track called Hooters. If you guys aren't familiar with it, Hooters is a great place to get terrible food. And we were sitting at Hooters drinking a beer and having some like wings or some like god awful wings. And I remembered my server from when we did the 24-hour, and I was like, oh hey, what's your face? And we got to talking and chatting. And meanwhile, me and my boy are going over our strategies I have like a little black notebook that I'm famous for carrying, and there's all sorts of weird notes and dialogue and diary from years of being at the racetrack. And so we're like writing this thing, and I'm like thinking like, dude, it's Daytona. We should go find some volunteers. And I'm like 2-3 beers deep already. And I just asked the server like, hey, have you ever been to the racetrack or, maybe done a pit stop before? she's like, no, a pit stop? Oh my God, I've never done that before. And I was like, cool, you're hired. And ask the other servers or any of your friends or anybody that might be interested in doing a pit stop. I didn't think they'd actually show up. The next day, I had like a couple people show up, and they were all from Hooters. And I put them in suits that I'm sorry, Nikki, but I put them in suits that hadn't been washed that were worn during the 8 hour, and put them in fire gear and gave them roles like the fire extinguisher and the lollipop and stuff. And we did like a full pit stop during that race with a bunch of bartenders and servers from across the street. And yeah, it was a great race. We like podiumed. We did pretty good. Everybody.
That is the best part of the story,
the
right
driver,
We podiumed with the Hooters.
the driver was so happy. I think that was the first time I ever got a tip from that guy. And still to this day, he's like, I want Kyle to be my race engineer because he knows how to have a good time with nothing. So that was a good grit story. That's one that goes into the Hall of Fame for that team, which has a very, very long history of weird shit happening.
That's awesome.
That really is truly legendary.
And you talked about being able to think quickly. Like you had a problem and you figured out how to solve it.
Yeah, it's a sink or swim industry, and if you're good at swimming, you'll do just fine.
There you go. Guys, we've kept them probably about 20 minutes too long already. You want to do some quick rapid fires around the horn before we get them out of here?
Hey, big boys.
I just gotta ask one question. Maybe this will be a quick answer. Maybe it won't be. As I guess, apparently, as Tristan has named me the resident conspiracy theorist, I'm interested on an inside opinion on this thing that I think about every now and then.
BOP.
And yes, BOP as it relates to storyline, right? So there's a new Ford. For an example, if Ford were to make a new Ford GT, would it take a year to get balanced properly? Would it do really well? Or I think Hyundai is actually a fabulous example, right? The Veloster goes into IMSA. They race amazingly well. They're killing it in the series. Meanwhile, the brand is
only with Herta, though. Like, I ran a Veloster.
Well, yeah.
And if you're not Brian Herta Autosport, Veloster is not the car you want to run. I mean, Copeland seemed to do pretty good with their cars, but the Veloster, and like, sorry Hyundai for throwing you under the bus, but that was a shit car to run. It was just unreliable. It seemed like that car, if you were on any kind of a budget, would never finish a race.
Sure.
So sorry, continue. I just had to
no.
throw that out
but I'm
there.
just, I just sometimes wonder about how, or for another example, a new Corvette comes out. Seems like it does great on the track. It doesn't. It would seem that if there were to be any tinkering with BOP, it would make sense for it to be in a direction that benefits the brand.
The brand with the new car. A Mustang is coming out next year. I'm imagining that's going to do pretty good.
So like Porsche's philosophy, like everybody thought the Porsche was going to kick ass. And my driver lineup originally was Jan Magnussen, Kevin Magnussen, Trenton Estep, and the team owner Mark Kwame. Kevin actually had to have surgery on his hand, so he couldn't make it. Jan showed up, and Jan's, I gotta say, one of my favorite drivers I've ever worked with, because that guy is no nonsense, direct as can be, and just a genuinely like calm and chill guy, as is Kevin. I met Kevin last October and found him to be the most down to earth F1 driver I've ever met. Mind you, that
Just
like
saying something.
I've met like 3 or 4 F1 drivers at the Miami race last year, and George Russell was too busy to say hi. Magnussen, he was just really chill, and then Yuki Tsunoda almost ran me off the road in a rental car. So Kevin was the only one I really got some time to talk to, but he was pretty down to earth. But so with the BOP thing, like Porsche's whole deal was, hey, we're gonna add some displacement to the car. We're gonna throw RSR 19 aero on it. We're going to tilt the engine 5 degrees, push it closer to the front of the car, and we're going to put the alternator, AC compressor, and as many components as we can in front of the gearbox to put as much weight towards the middle of the car as we can. IMSA made us put one of the biggest restrictors that we had for that car available onto the car. The BOP was just brutal to compete with. And Porsche's whole design behind that car, as marketed, was we're going to provide a car that's manageable for BOP and easier to drive than the R19 for the amateur, the bronze drivers. None of this felt true at Daytona, but as soon as they started to lift the BOP on the Porsche, guess what? It wins at Sebring. So it seems like there's a window where you throw just a little bit too much of BOP, the car's shit. Which it kind of looked like at Road America. I noticed that the Porsches were all kind of running in the back, whereas Vassar Sullivan and Corvette and the Mercedes were up in the front in the GT field.
BMWs too, like anything with long straights, those BMWs are rocket ships.
They pull like freight trains on the front straights, and they always have. And for us, we had a race at NOLA with the Aston Martin with 007 where Val and Derek both were fighting off the Mercedes, and the BMWs, and the BMWs, just like if you looked at the deltas between the top speeds of the cars, it's like the BMW had a few more kph on all the cars in the field. With BOP, so it's really interesting because you have IMSA is owned by NASCAR, right? The merger happened before my time, which wasn't that long ago. So NASCAR obviously is involved with brands like Toyota and Chevy and Ford. And I'm really excited. Ford's push into motorsports is something I've never personally seen before, because they are going to be, if I'm not mistaken, they're still working out a deal with Red Bull to be an engine manufacturer for Red Bull. And then they have a GTD or GT class car coming out. They have a GT4 car coming out. And then they're doing their own one make series with the I think it's called the Dark Horse, and it's gonna be like Carrera Cup or MX5 Cup or Super Trofeo. It's gonna be a one make IMSA sanctioned series. So like Ford's coming into it really hard, but I think what most people might not understand is those cars are being developed at Multimatic, and Multimatic has a very rich history of building badass fucking race cars. I mean, they showed up to Le Mans in 2000. Absolutely. I think it was 2016. They showed up with the Ford GT, and they did really well. They did really well. I've seen some of the testing, and some numbers that crew members that were on site were kind of sharing with each other. And I have a feeling that Ford is going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think the Corvettes had a lot of testing and a lot of they with the GTLM GTE car, and they started numbing it down to a GT3 spec. I want to give them credit that I think that they're going to be on a good platform going ahead, because they have a lot of mileage on what they've been expecting to produce, right? And you look at Toyota Lexus, they're steadily pushing back their rollout for the next Lexus vehicle, and they're holding on strong with that RCF that's straight up leading a championship by quite a margin. That's my old car, so I'm just super stoked to see my guys like just dominating the IMSA championship with that car, because the RCF's an old car, and it's
like almost 8-10 years old now, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's I think had one Evo kit in its homologation. So I mean they're really it's about as old as the GTR. And you don't see much of I mean, we saw one GTR at Road America, and it didn't last long. All right. Yeah, I know, it didn't last long. Yeah, so he's starting to warm up to you guys. I think he likes you. So nice. I think so with SRO, Andrew, I'm starting to see a trend that BOP is more is more about lap times than it is performance. And I say this because we were at Road America and we barely ran any laps. And then SRO makes a late night BOP change and lets us take 10 kilos out of the car. And we're like, we haven't run any laps. Like, how is this based on performance? Because we ran maybe 4 hot laps in 3 sessions because we had issues with the car and had to box and go to the garage. And you see cars like the Mercedes, which is, conveniently, there's one that is leading the championship owned by George Kurtz, who is a title sponsor for SRO with CrowdStrike. So you just can't help but notice, like, wow, the BOP seems to benefit like the cars that are going slow or the cars that are paying 6 times as much to be in the series. As for IMSA, I know John Doonan, and I know a lot of the people at IMSA, and it's hard for me to believe that there's any bias unless I see American car manufacturers dominating on their first outing with the cars.
Sure.
Now,
That
Daytona, I would say that the Porsche guys didn't play the BOP game because everybody, other than maybe Pfaff, that had a Porsche was owned by a privateer team, and they were just like, fuck it, let's send it. Whereas typically the game that most people want to play strategically is sandbagging. How do we make the car perform well without topping the charts? And then, we get our restriction. And I think people were trying to play the game, but IMSA had a microscope on Porsche because Pfaff had dominated with the R19 for 2 championships. And the R19 was a great car. They're still letting it race in SRO, and that car is the GT3 R19, the 991.2 chassis is still a very competitive car. The R23, the newest car on the 992 chassis, it's a good car. It's easy to work on. I think it's a lovely GT3 car. There's a possibility that maybe they threw too much aero at it because it literally failed the homologation, and the only thing they could really do was take the gurney off the wing, and that's what they did with that car. But even if you look at the Porsche Cup cars, the one make series GT3 Cups, the 991.2 kind of walks past the 992 in the straights because of the aero difference in the cars. So I think that the R19 was just a really well-developed car, and the R23 is going to get there. But it was pretty clear that IMSA didn't want the Porsche to dominate on its first outing because, BOP exists, at least as far as I can interpret, BOP exists to balance the competition. And anytime somebody makes a change, somebody's going to complain about it. For me, in my role, I try not to get caught up in the politics of BOP. So my philosophy is, well, if the car's slow, the car's slow. And if there's anything I can do about it, I'll make it faster. If there's nothing I can do about it, it still goes on track. Playing with BOP is a slippery slope, and that shit's way above my pay grade. But I think the cars that can successfully navigate a tough BOP, there's something to be said for the people that are behind the car engineering it and working out strategy. I mean, you look at Pfaff at Daytona, they finished on the lead lap. And I'd say that's pretty incredible given the pace that the R23s had in the Porsche Cup during the 24-hour. And, the Pfaff guys, like, I think they're one of the most, stop it. They're one of the most functional racing teams because it's a small group of guys that have been racing with each other since they were children. So that those guys are all like family to each other, and that crew never changes. There's no revolving door of crew members on that team. It's always the same guys showing up, and it's the same guys practicing with each other. And I think to find that kind of consistency on a car racing team in an industry as cutthroat as it is, there's something to be commended or said about that kind of consistency and that kind of coherency with a small group of people.
For sure.
So I think to quick answer your question, I think I think the Ford's going to be fast. I don't know what's going to happen with the Corvette. I'm curious to see. I'm not certain, but I'm curious to see what kind of BOP they get going into Daytona, because I believe both the Corvette and the Mustang will be entering Daytona for 2020. Fuck, what year is it? 23. They'll be around for 24, and then the Lexus will follow in 25, I believe.
Yep, that was the plan that I've heard too.
Yeah.
Just a curiosity, you know.
Yeah, Andrew's been, I see where he's coming from, because like there are times when it's like that. Okay, wait, they got it that right, that fast, right out of the box.
Not even that. Frankly, as a racing series of any size, you'd be a fool to not help the people who want to bring people to your race.
Good first impressions, right?
Not like a conspiracy theory way, but hey, if the sport's doing better, the sport's doing better, right? You promote your best players.
Yeah. Stop eating my headset. It's Goofy Bird. Sorry.
That's all right.
That's amazing. So it's time for some peak journalism, I think, and we're very proud of this quick segment that we do with our guests. It's just let's do some rapid fire before we let you go on with your with the rest of your evening, Kyle. So Tristan, Andrew, you want to start us off with rapid fire?
Sure. What's a power track?
A power track. I'm not certain of the answer, but if I'm going to guess, a power track is probably a place where like cars that are strong in straight line are going to do very well there. So maybe a track like Laguna Seca or Road America is a great example. You look at the performance of the Mercedes or the BMWs in particular. That's what I can imagine being a power track, where it's, hey, we have a Porsche, the car's built on downforce and torque, versus a BMW that has maybe a little less aero, but it's got this big honking inline six with a big old turbo on it. That's my best guess on a power track.
Background on that one is fairly consistently every track we've been to, and we've been to, well, luckily for us, quite a few as spectators. The commentary is always, well, this is a power track, and we haven't seen one that isn't. so we're trying to figure out what makes every track a power track, and it's a good description.
We heard that at VIR, and I was like, is it though?
VIR, Mosport, Road America, which, I wouldn't have pegged Canada as a power track, but someone did.
I would think that Watkins Glen is a good example of a power track. That track's
we heard
incredible.
It there too.
Yeah, that track's incredible. Road Atlanta, it's hard to determine whether Road Atlanta is more of a power track or not. I've driven it, but only in a rental car that I almost totaled doing rental car laps. I just wanted to experience the curbing and the S's coming like down the hill and up the hill, and I might have bounced a Toyota Sienna a little too hard on it and did like the Dubai two-wheeler for a little bit before I had both tires on, and my one of my mechanics on the team was riding shotgun. I could see his life flash before his eyes as we were two wheels up on his side of the car.
That's great.
Road Atlanta, I'm curious to ask, and I might start asking people what their thoughts are on it, because I would think that Road Atlanta, with the kind of straights that it has, is a power track, but I've seen cars like Porsche with a smaller engine with like a flat six, or a BMW with an inline, kind of dominate over cars that had V8s. So, who knows? I think that as far as some of the corners go, yeah, downforce is super important for that track, especially for like some of the high speed segments. But you also think about the back straight, and that's somewhere where if you have a power car, that's where you're going to probably gain a little bit of time on that sector.
Yeah, for sure.
Nick, we had a very insightful answer on that one, which is actually a surprise usually for our rapid fire questions. But you both of you guys, Nick and Andrew, you have to forgive me, because I wanted to ask the chicken wing question, but I forgot the second driver involved. So Nick, can you ask, or Andrew, can you ask the chicken wing question?
Oh, drums or flats?
No. Who can eat more?
Oh, okay, yeah, yes, the chicken wing question. Chicken wing eating contest, Kyle. Who eats more wings, Tony Stewart or Juan Pablo Montoya?
All right, if we're judging by physical appearance, it's gonna be Montoya. It's gonna be Montoya. But I think if we're basing this off of like alpha male like ego and pride and just like pure like good old boy determination, I'm gonna go with Tony, man.
Tony Stewart will take it through sheer force of will. That's your take on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Toilet paper, over the roll, under the roll.
There is a engineering drawing somewhere in my toolbox that confirms this.
I've seen the patent.
Yeah, I think
this is more of a personal approach. Personal answer.
I'm the kind of guy that's like, hey, if I'm putting a toilet paper roll on the thingy, I either have a guest coming over and I'm trying to prepare for that guest, or 9 times out of 10, I'm just in a hurry and I need to get it done. So the racing mechanic side of me throws it in, and if it fits, it sits. So it's fluid for me.
Just be happy it's there. Okay.
Got it. Okay.
Got it.
Interesting cop out. You've given insightful answers this entire hour and 40 minutes we've been on with you, and then there's a cop out on that one. Would you rather drive a shitty car on an awesome road or an awesome car on a shitty road?
Shitty car on an awesome road. I own a clapped out E36 M3 that's currently going through the process of trying not to be clapped out. But I live like a stone's throw from the Santa Cruz Mountains, and at least back in the day, it's toned down a little bit. We had a very interesting car culture of like toge drivers up in the hills. So I've owned this M3 for 10 years and I've driven it. Embarrassingly, I've driven it flat out up in those mountains with friends over the years. And, you know, I'm driving up against cars like Audi R8s or really tuned up S2000s or something like that. And I've got like a stock leaky, probably low compression on cylinder 6 with a head gasket leak E36 M3. And even that car clapped out, the handling capability of that car, I don't know. I just love it. And I personally think that if you can drive a shitty car to its limit, you can drive anything, and you can drive anything well. You know, I with motorcycles, I started racing flat track dirt bikes with Rich Oliver at his school, and you know, these are small displacement bikes, but the whole goal of the school and the racing that we did was being able to control. It was all bike control. It's sliding, it's drifting the bike, it's control over the throttle and the gears, and using that to your benefit, you know, through momentum. And I am so grateful that I learned how to ride bikes with him, because when my roommate brought home an R1 and I had never ridden a bike that big before, when I rode that R1, I had a lot more respect for the bike, because as soon as I sat on it, I realized I'm 160 pounds. And in third gear, if I flat it at like 6,000 RPM, I'm lifting the front wheel up. So this bike is a little more than, you know, more than what I'm used to. But I really think that driving a shitty car on an awesome road, you will learn so much more about driving than you would an awesome car on a shitty road.
Awesome answer. I think that's everyone's answered the same on that one.
And everybody has a little bit of a different take on it too. The answer is almost always the same, but the why is different, which is it's a great answer, great question. Thank you. That was awesome.
Well, on the shitty car topic, what's the best rental car that you've driven recently?
Oh, good question. So I wish you had asked this question a couple months later, because I found a place in Monterey, California that rents obscure vehicles, and they happen to have a DeLorean with a flux capacitor in the back.
Shut up.
Yeah. So there's a place. It's in Monterey. It's next to these really obscure car dealerships that like collect just strange collector cars. And this rental car company grabs like the picks of the litter, and so they have like some of the weirdest cars you'd ever see. But they do have a DeLorean, and I've always wanted to drive a DeLorean and dress up like Marty McFly and like drive that thing around. So in a couple of months, I'm treating myself to a day of just driving that thing around Monterey. I was probably going to show up to. I'm thinking of showing up to Rensport reunion in it. But the best rental car that I've had in terms of like sheer enjoyment of the car and what I needed it for was a new Audi A4. I really liked that car. It gave me vibes of like I was the getaway driver in the movie Ronin. It was it was a cool car. It was comfortable to drive, and I think that one takes the cake for me. I've been driving a lot of like GMCs and Fords, and they don't quite suit me and the kind of car that I enjoy, which I really like small cars. I own a old Honda Civic and an E36 M3. So like small cars that are like they're like soda cans compared to nowadays standards. That's more of my vibe.
Well, you just won me over because I'm the podcast resident Audi Volkswagen guy, and I've had 3 A4s myself. So that's my goal is to return to the promised land one day.
Yeah,
into an Audi.
They're good cars. I mean, it's funny with ownership. I worked on a lot of B5 S4s and A4s in my day, and I don't think I could ever bring myself to the anxiety and stress of owning an old Audi like that. Just with how hard it is to get parts and how much time and resources are needed to work on those without breaking plastic. Or I learned this with my E36. Once these cars age with the plastic that they employed on these cars, you really start to go, man, maybe everything plastic on this car just needs to get replaced now, immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be replaced as soon as you try to remove the clips that hold the underbody arrow on, because they will all break, every single one of them.
My going joke with working on those cars as a service technician for a few years was that they were like Hitler's revenge.
As an owner, I would agree with you. Mine had one that misfired, but only when it snowed. Turned out to be a cracked valve, but no one could figure that out for over a year.
That's great.
So
that's interesting.
It only did it when it snowed.
That's very interesting, actually.
Wow.
So I get it.
Well, look, you're too damn insightful and you're too damn thoughtful, Kyle. We can't do rapid fire because each one of these questions are taking like 3 or 4 minutes to get through, which is fine. It's awesome content, but we do got to let you go. We've been on an hour longer than we said we were going to be.
Almost 2 hours, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing stuff. The one thing I'll close on, just hearing you talk about this stuff, even the shitty stuff or the stuff that's really fatiguing, or like, and I noticed this when I talked to you, when I first met you at Seepkins, both you and like some of the other crew guys that Claire and I ran into, like it sounds hokey, but like the twinkle in your eye when you talk about it, like the passion just oozes out of all you guys and girls on these crews, just like oozing out of your pores. Like there's no matter how shitty or how hard it gets, like there's no other spot you'd rather be, which I think is really, really awesome. And like you can tell, even though this is an audio medium and no one can actually, when we release, is going to be seeing you or the bird on camera. I did screen grab it though for social media. Look at that. Like people are going to tell, and I think that's really cool. It makes for really good content. So I appreciate you. All 3 of us, we appreciate you being on.
Oh, absolutely. And I know we've been talking about it for quite a while, and especially the schedule I've kept this year, it's been It's just hard for people to even get a hold of me because I'm going from one dumpster fire to the next as far as just like a chaotic race weekend. Um, but I really appreciate you guys bringing me on and asking some of these questions because you definitely got me like thinking about stuff that I either take for granted or just didn't really think about it in a different perspective.
So if people want to follow your adventures in this sport, where can they follow you on social? Like what are the handles?
The handle that I pretty much stick just to Instagram. I'm not I'm I that's always been my platform. Facebook is somewhere where you can reach me, under Kyle Downs, and I kind of keep it just normal like anybody else's Facebook. But my Instagram, which is where you kind of see all the updates for racing as I find time to post them, would be at underscore KDowns underscore, and you can't really miss it because if you click on it, there's nothing but race cars.
You're in the right spot.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Well, Kyle, we appreciate you being on. Listeners, we appreciate you tuning in. We love recording this for you. We cannot wait to do it again. Thanks again, Kyle. Until we talk again, everybody, take care.